In the quiet suburban neighborhood, the Millers, Jack, Maria, their baby daughter Lily, and their German shepherd, Max, lived a life that was as close to perfection as it gets. Max was tall, with a gleaming coat and intelligent amber eyes, but lately, he had been the source of tension in the house. "He's too unpredictable with Lily," Maria declared one evening, as the sound of their baby cooing reached them. Frustration taut in her voice, she stroked her child's fuzzy lock. "Last week, he kicked over her crib with his tail. What if he does something worse some other time?" Jack sighed loud and massaged the nape of his neck. "He's just energetic, you know." Max could never hurt her intentionally. "He's a good dog." "Good dog or not, I don't feel safe anymore," Maria snapped. Her voice crackled slightly, betraying the guilt she felt for even suggesting what was to come. "I think it's time to rehome him." The words hung in the air like a storm cloud. Jack opened his mouth to protest, but a sharp bark from Max, who had been lying in the corner, ears perked up as if he understood every word, cut him off. His gaze shifted between the couple, and for a moment, there was an almost human plea in his eyes. The days that followed were filled with tension. Maria started reading up on adoption forums, while Jack was torn between loyalty to Max and concern for his family's peace, avoiding the topic altogether. Max, none the wiser to the precarious situation he was in, continued his usual antics, bounding through the house, chasing after Lily's stuffed toys, and guarding the front door with military precision. Then came the incident that tipped the scales. It was one of those nippy November evenings when Maria had left Lily on a blanket in the living room while getting dinner ready. Max sat not far from them, his ears pricking up with every single noise. Then, there was a crashing noise from outside. Maria's heart went to her throat as she ran back into the room to see Max standing over Lily, his teeth bared and a low growl rumbling from his chest. "Max!" Maria shrieked, panic trembling in her voice. She lurched forward, clutching Lily in her arms and glaring at the dog. Max backed away, his tail low, but his eyes fixed on the broken window where shards of glass glinted like tiny daggers on the carpet. Jack ran in, alarmed by the commotion. "What happened?" he demanded, looking from his wife to the baby to the visibly shaken dog. "I told you he's dangerous," Maria shouted. He was growling at her. "What if I hadn't come in time?" But before Jack could respond, a shadow loomed outside the broken window. A man's voice was muttering curses as he stumbled over the sill, oblivious to the furious dog waiting inside. Max reacted in an instant. He launched himself at the intruder with a ferocity that left little doubt. The man yelped, falling backward as Max's teeth snapped inches from his face. Jack, momentarily frozen, sprang into action, grabbing a heavy lamp and holding it defensively. "Call 911!" he yelled out to Maria, who fumbled for her phone, her hands trembling. The intruder scrambled up to his feet, attempting to flee, but Max blocked his path, growling low and menacingly. The dog's mere presence made him give a second thought to any further advance. By the time the police arrived, the situation had diffused, thanks entirely to Max. The intruder was a petty thief with a long record, handcuffed and escorted away, while the Millers were shaken but unharmed. As they sat in the living room, the reality of what had happened began to sink in. Maria was holding Lily tightly, her eyes darting to Max, who was lying at Jack's feet, panting but otherwise calm. For the first time in weeks, there was no trace of fear or uncertainty on her face, only gratitude. He saved her," Maria whispered, the only sound barely above the breath it rode on. "He was protecting Lily the whole time." Jack nodded his head, placing a stilling hand on Max's head. "He is a good dog, Maria. Maybe better than we deserve." But as the Millers would shortly find out, Max's heroics that evening were only the beginning. Unbeknownst to them, the would-be thief was only a cog in a much larger, more dangerous machine, and Max was about to prove that his loyalty knew no bounds. The days following the break-in were a whirlwind for the Millers. The police praised Max for his bravery, and their neighbors marveled at the story of the loyal German shepherd who had thwarted a robbery. Yet, while immediate danger appeared to have passed, unease continued to linger, like a shadow refusing to dissipate. Maria was the first to notice it. First, it was subtle, Max's heightened alertness, the way his ears perked at the faintest sound, or how Head patrolled the house at odd hours of the night. She dismissed it as residual stress from the break-in, but Max's behavior only grew more intense. Head stationed himself near Lily's crib, growling softly at the window or the closed door. "Do you think he's okay?" Maria asked Jack one evening as they prepared for bed. Jack, fresh from fixing the broken window, looked back at Max, who was lying by the crib. "He's probably just being extra cautious after what happened. I mean, can you blame him? He's doing his job." Maria bit her lip. "I know, but it's like he senses something we don't." Jack shrugged, though a flicker of doubt crossed his face. "Let's keep an eye on him. If it gets worse, we'll call the vet or a trainer." That night, Maria slept fitfully. She was awake to the sound of Max's low growl. She glanced at the clock, 3:17 a.m. She felt her heart racing while getting out of bed and creeping into the nursery. Max was standing by the window, stiff, staring intently at something outside. "Max, what is it?" she asked softly, her voice trembling. He didn't move, didn't even look at her. Maria peeked through the curtains but saw nothing, just the quiet street illuminated by a pale street lamp. Still, Max remained fixated, growls deepening. Next morning, Maria was telling this as news to Jack. What if somebody was outside? What if they are watching us? Jack frowned, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I'll check the security cameras. Maybe it's just a raccoon or something." But when Jack reviewed the footage, his stomach churned. At 3:15 a.m., the camera captured a shadowy figure lingering near their driveway. The person moved quickly, staying out of the light, and disappeared into the trees just moments before Maria entered the nursery. "We need to call the police," Jack said grimly. The officer who arrived later that day was polite but non-committal. "Could be someone casing the neighborhood," he said. "It's good you have cameras. Make sure to lock your doors and windows. We'll increase patrols around here." Though the officer's words were meant to reassure, they had the opposite effect. Maria couldn't shake the feeling that their home had become a target. Jack installed additional locks and motion sensor lights, but even that didn't seem enough. Max, though, remained unwavering. He was their sentry, always on alert, always watching. His steadfastness comforted Maria as the threads of her nerves were beginning to unravel. She started noticing little things, the way he would place himself between Lily and the door during nap time, or how he would bark at the mailman with such ferocity that he had never shown before. A fortnight later, tensions reached a head. It was a Sunday evening, quiet. Jack was out back on the grill, making burgers, while Maria set the table inside. Lily sat in her high chair, giggling and trying to talk, while Max lay on the floor, his ears swiveling like radar dishes. Then, a loud crash from the front of the house cut through the serenity. Jack burst inside, Maria right behind. The front door had been forced open, the lock was splintered. A man in a ski mask stood in the entryway, holding a crowbar. For a split second, no one moved. Then Max exploded into action. With a speed that belied his size, Max launched himself at the intruder, his teeth sinking deep into the man's arm. The crowbar fell to the floor with a clatter as the man screamed, dancing around the room in his attempts to shake the furious dog off. Jack grabbed a kitchen chair, holding it like a weapon, while Maria dialed 911 with shaking hands. "Let him go, Max!" Jack yelled as the man stumbled backward, tripping over the threshold and falling onto the porch. Max let loose but didn't back off, continuing to bark loudly. The intruder sprang to his feet and took off in a sprint down the street, clutching his hurt arm. Moments later, sirens filled the air. The police arrived really fast, and this time, they took the situation much more seriously. "Looks like the same guy from the first break-in," one officer said. "He might be part of a bigger group." Mariah's heart sank. "A group? You think they'll come back?" "Hard to say," the officer replied. "But your dog, he's something else. If I were you, I'd keep him close." As night began to fall and the family sat together in the living room, the weight of the evening's events settled over them. Max lay at their feet, his fur still ruffled from the adrenaline of the fight. "He's not just a pet," Jack said quietly. "He's family. And I think he's trying to tell us something." Maria nodded, and her eyes brimmed with tears. "We need to protect him as much as he's protecting us." But as they would soon find out, Max's instincts were sharper than they could have imagined. The danger wasn't over, it was only just beginning. The second break in events shook the Millers to their core. It could no longer be a question of coincidence. Their family was being targeted. Jack and Maria decided to take every precaution to protect their home and, more importantly, their daughter. Max, their loyal German shepherd, had proven invaluable once again. Yet, even his unwavering vigilance seemed like it might not be enough. The next day, Jack fitted a high-tech security system. Now, every angle of their property was covered with night vision cameras, and the front door was reinforced with a steel frame. Meanwhile, Maria busied herself researching self-defense classes and purchasing a few essential tools for their safety. But despite their efforts, a sense of foreboding hovered over the house. Max seemed to feel it too. His behavior became more and more intense, even obsessive. He would pace the perimeter of the house, sniffing at windows and doors, his ears always swiveling toward the slightest sounds. At night, he patrolled the hallways, occasionally stopping outside Lily's room and growling low into the darkness. It culminated 3 nights later. The night was still, bathed by the quiet, silvery light of the moon. Jack and Maria had, after a day of constant fussing, finally succeeded in getting Lily to sleep. Weary, they collapsed onto the couch, putting on a movie to distract themselves. Max lay at their feet, his eyes half closed, his body coiled and ready to spring. "Do you think we're overreacting?" Maria asked softly. "Maybe the new security measures are enough. Maybe whoever it was will think twice before coming back." Jack hesitated, his gaze fixed on the screen but his mind clearly elsewhere. "I hope so," he said finally. "But I can't shake the feeling that this isn't over." As if on cue, Max's ears shot up. A low growl rumbled from his chest. He stood abruptly, his gaze locked on the front door. Jack paused the movie, his heart pounding. "What is it, boy?" Maria clutched his arm. "Do you hear something?" Before Jack could respond, a sharp clatter echoed from the backyard. It sounded like metal scraping against metal. Max barked furiously, darting toward the back door. Jack grabbed a flashlight and a baseball bat he had stashed by the couch. "Stay here with Lily," he told Maria, his voice firm. "I'll check it out." "Be careful," Maria whispered, her eyes wide with fear. Jack stepped out into the backyard, Max right behind him. The night was preternaturally still, the only sound the soft rustling of leaves in the breeze. Jack swept the flashlight around the yard, his grip on the bat tightening. "Show yourself," he yelled, his voice firm even as his heart threatened to burst with fear. The house didn't say anything for a minute. Then, a figure emerged from behind the shed. He was wearing black clothes and a hood to obscure his face. In one hand, he had a crowbar, in the other, a flashlight. "What do you want?" Jack shouted. The man didn't answer. Instead, he stepped closer, his movements slow and deliberate. Max's growl deepened, and his body tensed, ready to pounce. "Get off my property," Jack warned, raising the bat. The man chuckled, a low, sinister sound. "You think a dog and a stick are going to stop me?" he sneered. Without warning, the man launched himself. But Max was quicker. He launched at the intruder, loosening the crowbar out of his hand and onto the ground, pinning him. A scream tore from the man's throat as he writhed under the heavy, unyielding grasp of the canine, but Max held tight, bared teeth and growls shaking the night. Jack fumbled for his phone, dialing 911 with shaking fingers. "There's an intruder in my house," he said in a rush. "My dog has him pinned, but I need help." Minutes later, the police arrived to find the man still pinned beneath Max's unyielding weight. They cuffed him and dragged him out to the patrol car, his face pale, the bravado gone. "We've been tracking this guy for weeks," one officer explained. "He's part of a crew that's been targeting families in the area." Looks like you've got a guardian angel here." Maria, who had come outside with Lily in her arms, hugged Max tightly. "You saved us again," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you, Max." But as the police questioned the intruder, a chilling detail emerged. The man admitted he wasn't acting alone. There were others and they were watching. The next few days became a whirlwind for Jack and Maria as they prepared for the worst. The police gave them assurances that they were working on dismantling the group targeting their home, but the Millers couldn't get rid of the feeling that they were still in danger. Max, as had never been before, stopped leaving Lily's side. The constant presence was consoling and yet a grim reminder that at any time a serious attack might befall any one of them. Their families had to become the strong for one another, and also for Max, who was ready and had risked much just to protect them. Unbeknownst to them, unseen eyes watched and patiently waited for the perfect time to strike again. The unease that had gripped the Millers gradually turned into palpable fear as days turned into nights with no resolution. Jack and Maria kept close to home, barely going out except for necessities. Every creak of the house, every shadow beyond the panes, sent their nerves spiraling. Max, ever the vigilant guardian, seemed to grow more restless by the hour, his eyes scanning the house as if anticipating something none of them could see. Things started turning ugly the night a storm knocked heavily against their window panes. A raging thunderstorm outside, while inside the sitting room, the family had been huddled together in attending to Lily, sleeping fitly inside Maria's arms, Jack on one couch beside Max, stroking him absent-mindedly with eyes set elsewhere, all taken care of by only one crackling fire to press their raw nerves toward recovery. Then, as if lightning had lit up the room, Max's ears perked up. He sprang upright, stiffened, and let out a low, menacing growl. "What is it, boy?" Jack whispered, his heart pounding. Max moved toward the front door, his growl growing louder. The hair on his back stood on end, a clear sign that something was wrong. Suddenly, the security alarm blared, piercing the silence. Jack jumped to his feet, grabbing the baseball bat he had placed nearby. Maria clutched Lily tightly, her face pale with fear. "Stay here," Jack said firmly. "Lock the door behind me. Be careful," Maria pleaded, tears welling in her eyes. Jack nodded and slowly opened the door, entering the hallway. Max stayed right by his side, the growl deepening as they neared the front of the house. The flashing lights of the alarm cast eerie shadows on the walls, but Jack's attention was fixed on the front door. It was open. Rain was coming into the entryway, soaking the rug. Jack's head jerked around, trying to make out a form of anything moving. Max barked short and loud, his eyes fixed through the threshold onto the yard shrouded in darkness. Jack took a firmer grasp on the bat as he stepped out into the rain. "Show yourself!" he yelled, trying to be heard above the storm. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of rain and thunder. Then a shadow moved. Jack turned toward it, his adrenaline surging. Max barked again, louder this time, and sprinted toward the figure. "Max, wait!" Jack called, running after him. The figure sprinted away, dodging through the yard and into the trees beyond. Jack hesitated for a moment, wanting to run after the intruder yet reluctant to leave his family alone. But Max gave him no choice, disappearing into the darkness after the shadowy figure. Maria was still inside the house with Lily, anxiously waiting. The door, which was locked, now felt like a very fragile barrier from the unknown. She paced the room, her mind racing. Suddenly she heard footsteps, multiple pairs, approaching the house. Her breath caught in her throat as she backed into the corner, clutching Lily protectively. The back door rattled violently, and then came the sound of glass shattering. Maria screamed as two men climbed through the broken window, masks covering their faces. "Stay quiet, and no one gets hurt," one of them growled. But Maria wasn't alone. Max burst in through the back door, bared teeth and growling loudly. The men did not even have time to act before he sprang upon the nearest one, knocking him to the ground. The second man swung a crowbar at Max, but the latter dodged with an uncanny speed, his eyes never leaving the men. Gathering all her courage, Maria grabbed a heavy lamp and swung it at the second intruder. The impact sent him staggering, and he dropped the crowbar with a clatter. "Get out of my house!" she shouted, her voice shaking but resolute. Jack arrived in time to see Max pinning the first intruder to the ground. The second man, disoriented, tried to make a run for it, but Jack intercepted him, delivering a blow with the bat that sent him sprawling. In the distance, the police sirens wailed, growing louder by the second. When the officers finally arrived, they found the two intruders subdued, one firmly held by Max, the other groaning on the floor with Jack standing over him. The police immediately took both men into custody, their earlier bravado replaced by fear and humiliation. In the days that followed, it became clear to the Millers that these men were part of a bigger criminal ring, just as the police had suspected. Their arrests led to the capture of several others, effectively dismantling the group. The Millers' home was finally safe. Max was again hailed as a hero and a local legend. In no time, the story of this loyal German shepherd who defended his family against all odds spread everywhere. Neighbors stopped by bringing treats for Max and thanking the Millers for being brave. Maria, once apprehensive about Max, now couldn't imagine their lives without him. She often found herself sitting with him, her hand resting on his head as she whispered words of gratitude. "You're not just our dog," she said one evening, tears in her eyes. "You're our guardian angel." Jack smiled, watching the scene from the doorway. "He's more than that," he said. "He's family." Life slowly returned to normal for the Millers, but they never forgot the lessons they had learned. They found out what it really means to be loyal and brave through the dog they once wanted to rehome. Max's steadfast devotion had saved their lives and bound them together more tightly as a family. And as for Max, he was always watchful. His position as protector of the Millers was secured. To him, the battle was never truly over, for to Max, the protection of his family was not an instinct but a purpose.